Let's call the fiscal court special meeting for the budget for on Thursday, March the 7th to order. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Squire Sebastian.
She gave a thumbs up. She's got it.
Squire Blackburn.
He said,
Squire Muller.
Here.
yeah,
Squire Tracy.
thumbs up.
Squire Booth.
Yes.
Okay.
Squire Moore.
Here.
Judge Wells.
Here, okay. If we would go down the line, and I don't know who's here, so whatever the best way, if you one at a time, let us know. I know that Rick Sparks is here, and other than that, I don't know who's here. Susan, I know, is here, so anybody else, please say who you are and that you're here.
Chief Hutcherson.
Chief Hutcherson's okay.
And Northcutt.
Ann's here, thank you. Say again, Brittany.
Yes.
Okay.
Robert Hewitt.
Robert's here, good.
John's here.
John's here, okay. Okay, I've got Chief, Ann, Brittany, Robert, John. Is Charlie here?
Charlie's here.
Okay, I've got Charlie, and Jeremy's in the office. You need something, Pam?
I need a key.
Anybody else? I've got Chief, Ann, Brittany, Robert, John, Jeremy, Charlie, and Susan. Anybody else?
That's it.
Okay. All right. Let's begin. Susan, will you want to get us started?
Good morning, Court. This is our second in-depth meeting to review the activities for fiscal court. I have a form on the screen that is intended to be a summary form. You do not have that distributed. There is so much activity and so much changes going on right now with the projections and the year-end figures. And I felt it might be best just to leave you with the working document we had for 4:30 in case it had some notes on it and so forth. And then I'll distribute the version out that we talk about today. And there have been a few changes to your 4:30 document that we'll go over that are, we'll go over the significant changes. There have been a few minor changes, but some of them will have some significant numbers to them, and I'll speak to those. But pretty much the document you're looking at for 4:30 is what we're going to be talking about today, with some exceptions. I just wanted to touch on a few things about where we are. We've already talked about and looked at some of our most significant areas of activity, and that being the jail, and that has already presented, the fire has already presented, the road has presented, and the sheriff has presented.
Okay, there's some feedback. If y'all could just mute your mics so we can, we're not interrupted, and then we'll call on you in order. So continue on, Susan, sorry.
And I'm using the summary form, and this is the summary form that we use a lot during our regular monthly meetings for our month summaries, where we do a consolidated view of all the funds. Because of the quirks in fund accounting, I just thought that I just want to help guide you through this process of how to look at it. All of these figures that you see for revenue and appropriations are also on your worksheets. So where you have your revenue worksheet, you should have the same totals for by fund for revenues, and the same totals by fund for appropriations requests in the orange. So again, the jailers presented requests of appropriation request of, almost $4.5 million for the jail. The road department has presented appropriations requests of $2.4 million. The fire department has presented appropriations request of $5.1 million. And I need to also remind court that as of January 1, you approved a budget for the sheriff's office, which is an independent budget, but we have to supplement that budget with general tax revenue because it does not generate enough fees to cover its expenses, and we do process that payroll and get reimbursed for that payroll, but there is a $1 million shortfall in that fund. So by fund, if we take the appropriations request, and I'm just trying to help you guide through the document, I don't know if you can see the pointer or not, but the appropriations for the road, if you look at the road column, of $2.4 million, and then you can see that based on our current estimates for the road, we will have for 2021, we'll have $1.3 million in revenues. And as we touched on already, we know that we have some decreases based on the gasoline tax projections that are significant, as well as some intergovernmental revenues for reimbursements that we have reduced our estimates on. So just for the road department, we have a deficit of $1 million, almost $1.1 million deficit already programmed based on activities we have.
I want to just what you do. You hear Squatter River Valley.
Yes.
So my question is we had two documents come in we had an initial document and then we had an amended document. Has the amended document been put into the forms that we got yesterday? Or the forms that you're working on? What we got yesterday was just a current budget document.
What you received yesterday was a current financial report with the latest revenues and the latest expenses. And that,
So
you received that.
Yes, so on your sheet, is the amended, because I'm looking at it from this, remember, iPhone SE, my county iPhone, which is tiny. I'm reviewing it on there, so I'm having a tough time seeing your spreadsheet. So I didn't know if the documents that you're talking with and using today has the amended jailer's budget in it, or the initial that you received. Just a question for me, that's all.
The 4:30, if you have your paper documents from the 4:30 meeting, okay, your 4:30 meeting, then you can find most of these numbers on there from the jailer. The jailer made requests on 4:30 of 4.479. That's what we have, okay? That's what we're showing, is the amended documents from the 4:30 meeting. So this is the long form that I'm presenting here, and what I'm trying to guide court through here is that based on by fund there are deficits that have to be made up for in the road, the jail, the fire, and the sheriff's office that already total $7 million, over $7 million, because each of those funds do not generate enough revenue to cover those funds. So we start this process, and you have to see, and I want court to try to understand that in order to present a balanced budget, which is what we have to do for the state, is the way we balance that budget is we have to transfer money from the general fund. So the general fund has to be able to be strong enough to generate enough revenue, and hopefully in the current year, to be able to cover the deficits in the other funds for the current year. So just format. I'm just going over some format issues right now that we will continue to see and hopefully learn how the process works by the format. So based on that format, we already have looked at, like I said, about $7 million in deficit. So then in the general fund, we have to represent that as transfers out from the general fund. Now, on that note, and it's a good note if you looked at the revenue report, which, let's look at it in a good note. You got this in your packet yesterday. The revenue report, the latest revenue report, and our primary areas, as you well know, for taxes in the county are our payroll tax and our insurance premium tax. And you can see we have met and exceeded already our budget for payroll taxes by over $200,000, probably going to be over $300,000 once the money is still we still have a backlog of monies to be booked, and the money is coming in for the end of April, so that should be updated hopefully tomorrow to go out in another report to you to show where we stand there. But you can see on the revenue report that we've met and exceeded our budget there. We've met and exceeded our budget by $100,000, over $100,000 in net profits. Even with the extension of the deadline, we've already met that budget. And if you flip over on your revenue sheet, page 3 of your revenue sheet, under the Fire Protection Fund, where we have the insurance premium tax assigned, you can see that we've met and exceeded the budget there. So we do have some positive notes that are coming in revenue-wise. So that'll be as we already know, the next quarter we'll see what the impact is with the disaster. But for now, we can see at least some good money changes there, but obviously we need that to assign to the deficits in the other funds. As far as yes.
I wanted to ask for a question here. I asked last time if you had received any guidance from specific areas, and you said we will get guidance from like the Department of Insurance, etc. Have we received any supplemental guidance from the area plus how what these deficits will be going into the line budget? Because I'm
the only additional information that has that I've seen is from tourism, about a 15% decrease, and I have reflected that is one of the major changes, and I want to move to the changes that I've made in the document, your 430 document. I did reflect that 15% decrease in tourism, but that's a wash for us, so that's really not an impact for us directly. Let me put that it's not in our budget. That's because whatever money we handle, we receive and then we turn around and give it back. So that's not a direct impact. Squire Sebastian, the projections and the guidance is ongoing, and I do not have year-end projections yet for this budget session. So I am continually working on collecting that information, but I don't have projections for this work session. We're supposed to do an in-depth review, continued in-depth review of our activity line items today. So I was just trying to give some format guidance on how to read your forms. But as far as other significant changes, and also a significant good piece of news, is as you all probably know, the interest rate is it's a good and a bad. If you want to make money, it's not 0.5%. It's not a great amount of money. But if you want to borrow money, according to our liaison at KCO, the debt service, we can get a 2.25% interest rate for 7 years. And what I have recalculated into the capital budget, that's changed from your last meeting document, I have decreased what we're going to need there because of two things. Basically, our 2020 debt service had $100,000 placeholder built in, for consideration for some sort of, I think, used apparatus or partial, I don't know, I can't remember what the exact guideline was, but we did have in the current year's budget, $100,000 built in for some activity there, which we did not exercise in this current year. So that will that offsets whatever interest we have to take with the new issue that's being proposed. So we're proposing a $900,000 expenditure and borrowing $900,000 for that expenditure for the fire service apparatus and the related equipment to that. I've made the appropriations estimate based on that favorable interest rate on an aggressive 7-year term, and for the 8 months that we might have debt service on it, since we're anticipating an October delivery of the equipment at this point. As far as I know, that's still on track. Chief, is that right? Anyway, we'll incorporate that into our estimates. So that's good news. So that debt service number appropriation came down, and I left it flat basically. So that was one change. Another minor change is the codification grant was near completion. I made a change there. That's represented in the county attorney's line items. There is a new line item that you'll see when the new document goes out for the legal consultant that was agreed on at the last court meeting. There is a reflection when we get to that line item in the data processing for the IT department or IT equipment. We're increasing that by $15,000 to cover a much needed email platform, I believe, countywide. And then some other minor changes related to some grants that have been, and grant applications that I understand have been in the works for solid waste, but again, that had a reflecting offset for the grant revenue. So some minor changes there, but overall, otherwise, the document for revenues and expenses that you received on 430 is pretty much the same. So at this point, I will bring up the expenditure document, and we can, or appropriations document. It's not, not spent until you all vote on it, but for the proposed appropriations I have, and you have your own document you can go through, and as you see changes in the figures, maybe you can pencil them in now for discussion, but again, most of them, I'll try to highlight those as we get to them. So Judge, we were going to, I believe, begin with a discussion about the email project at this point, since we've already covered the debt service.
Do you want to do, I'm sorry, Susan, do you want to do Farmdale and the EPA? That's next before the IT.
Oh, yes, thank you. I want to point out on the federal projects, the federal project summary, the only project that I'm reflecting there is the Farmdale Sanitation District, and that is with an EPA grant. So as you can see, we show revenues of $384,000, and then the project at $698,000. This is totally the phase 2 part of the project for the sewer rehabs. So that what we have is basically a county obligation that's already been made and committed through that grant process of $314,000. The process is, again, format-wise, you think, well, we budgeted this last year. We have to budget it in order to spend it. And the project didn't execute very quickly last year. It's my understanding from Ann and her liaison with H&B that I think they're ready to move very quickly with this project. There was a few tweaks, but I believe it sounded to me like once it starts, it's gonna begin and end very quickly. So we may actually see this money in the federal project spent. So that's all Farmdale. The and the EPA part of it. If you're looking at it in comparison to last year, I just might mention that there was an appropriation, I believe that had no county match, that it was gonna flow through us, to Farmdale, but we've not made any, I've not reflected that in the budget at all this year because it's my understanding that has expired and I'm not sure when it's gonna be renewed. So if that actually happens, we can always amend it, back in, but it would be a pass-through at that point.
Susan, if you'll stop right there, Susan, if you'll allow, I want Robert and Ann to talk about the EPA grant, and an update on Farmdale to the court, and that'll kind of give them a better understanding where this money is going to go. So, Ann, if you or Robert, Ann, if you'll start on the EPA grant.
Yes, and the two different phases of the EPA grant that Susan's referring to, just to bring everybody, make sure you understand where we are. We had the phase 1 design grant, and that's the grant that expired at the end of March. Our EPA representative is working on trying to get that reallocated to Farmdale for a different scope, since they have decided to enter into an agreement with the city of Frankfort. So the EPA is working on trying to reallocate that. That's what's not reflected in the budget. What is in the budget is the project that will begin as soon as they can get to, I believe and Robert can update us on this, I believe they're close to being ready to go out to bid. Of course, that's been delayed somewhat because of the virus and some things like that. It will be a continuation project. They started last year and improved the collection systems of 3 of the subdivisions in the Farmdale area. This next project will continue that work in some different subdivisions. So I'm sure Robert can give us better information on the technical side of that.
Robert?
Yes, Judge, good morning, Court. For the Coolbrook rehab, plans have been submitted to Division Water. We're waiting just their final blessing on it. Plans have also been submitted to the EPA. I had a call with H&B yesterday. They're reaching out just to get a status update on those, but Ann is correct. We do anticipate getting that out to bid this spring with a summer construction period. Probably looking at a maximum of, I would anticipate probably anywhere between 60 and 90 days. I'll have to double check the paperwork. So that is moving forward, and we do anticipate that being approved here very shortly. On the phase 1 design money with the connection to the city, there's a meeting scheduled for early next week with the county, H&B, Farmdale chairperson, as well as the design engineer for the city of Frankfort on their pump station improvement project to coordinate the agency's activities amongst each other as a way to further define our scope of work requested by EPA Region 4 in Farmdale's attempt to request additional funding from what had expired.
Okay.
Hey, Judge, this is Rick. I wanted to let members of the court know that Farmdale has scheduled a regular meeting this afternoon. I think they distributed an agenda. Some of you may already have that, but I don't know if anybody was planning on attending, but that is scheduled for today at 5.
Okay. So if you have a question on the Farmdale, if you'd give me your thumb and I'll call on you. As we get through this process, we are going to go back to the rotation, but on this specifically, are there any questions? I'm looking for a thumb for anybody on that. Seeing none, Susan, if you would continue on. We'll go to IT if you're ready for that.
I have a question.
Okay,
That's my
Squire.
district. Is that project going to start this year? The improvement?
I think, Robert, would you answer that? I think you answered that earlier. You said this summer, is that correct?
Yes, construction we anticipate being this summer.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Susan, if you would, let's move on with IT.
Yes, so if you're on your expense worksheet, page 4 of your expense worksheet, which is account 5091705. So page 4 of your expense worksheets. The IT supply, this is the $15,000, and the increase I'm talking, these are budgetary increases I'm reflecting here. And this is the additional money that is intended to fund the email platform.
And so I'll ask Andrew, if you would you explain why we need to change the email?
So we have been lucky to basically over the past several years, since I've been here, we basically have been grandfathered into a free email platform. We haven't paid any money for our emails, which is just unheard of, and I think we've been lucky in some way about that, because normally that's a pretty major expense for organizations of our size. Now, we have started running into issues because it is a free platform. It doesn't have all the technology and the features we need. It's very limited. Basically, all it gets us is just basic emails, and it doesn't have the other technological features that we've needed. And we have run up recently on these limitations more and more, and it is really starting to be, these limitations are really starting to be a problem for us, particularly as we go about fulfilling open records requests. So, we've been lucky not to have to pay. I've been here, I guess, about 5-6 years, and I don't know how far back, that this free platform goes, but for a while, we've been really lucky to not have to pay that money, but we're to a point where we really don't have a choice. And it's going to be a significant cost. It's going to be a significant cost. Probably, we're based on our research and our talks with the two different options. It's probably going to be in the neighborhood of about $30,000 a year. So that leaves us. So if we look at 50,000, that's more than half of our budget's just going to be spent on that, and that's only going to leave us about 20,000 for just general expenses, including about 10,000 are other licensing fees. Licensing fees have gone up. Everybody wants to go to a licensed model. They don't want you just to pay one time for a piece of equipment. They want to lock you in to a service license fee, and so you add another 10,000 or so, around 9,000. So right there, that's close to 30 plus 40, and that leaves us just about 10,000 for or so for everything else that we need to do. So we're only doing what we absolutely have to do, but as you know, in IT, $10,000 or $11,000 can go very quickly. If you have to have a server that's replaced, that can easily be $5,000 to $10,000 pretty quickly. So a switch could be close to $1,000 depending on the model. So so that's kind of where we stand, and that's the email. The email thing is really kind of it's really unavoidable.
So, Andrew, I have a question. Are we going to, is this bid for like a standard or a premium? And can you tell us how robust we're looking at to make this new platform, how robust it needs to be?
So, we're looking at two basic platforms. They're the big players. We're looking at Google, which is basically, we're basically on a free Google platform now, so we're looking at going to a paid Google platform. We're also looking at Microsoft 365, and both of these platforms are going to have the capabilities and technologies that we need that we currently don't have. One of it is going to be increased email space, server space. Like right now, one of the limitations of this free platform is our accounts are capped, and that's a big problem, particularly for some of our users who are very high volume users. Okay, so both of these platforms are going to help us address that. It's also going to help us address fulfilling open records requests in a lot better manner. Because it's going to actually have the tools designed into that we need.
Okay, are there any other questions? Squire Tracy, I see your hand up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Andrew, quick question. Did you receive official word that the county was going to be charged for the email platform that we currently use?
So no, I mean, right now we're not paying for our current platform. Now I can't tell you, it's a Google platform, so I can't tell you. It could be either, anytime they, they don't have to continue to give it to us forever. They can come in and say, hey, we're going to end this in a month, and you either have to pay us or move to something else. But that's not the issue right now. The issue right now is that our current platform doesn't have the technology that we desperately need to do what we need to do as for email.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, I have one. Andrew, since you're our IT specialist, do you have a professional recommendation, and it's not based on what we need, how robust we need this system?
We couldn't hear you, Squire Sebastian. You're not coming through very clear. We couldn't hear your question, Squire Sebastian. Can you repeat it?
Sure. I'm talking about which, if Andrew's thoroughly reviewed these in his professional IT opinion, if he has one recommendation for us over another based on the robustness and the scalability of the systems for what we need.
Well, we haven't made any final decision, and there's only two options, and both of these platforms offer very similar type of services. So I mean, they're both going to offer us what we need. The Google platform doesn't have, there are fewer options, I guess, with Google. They're more broad. The options are more broad. Microsoft can be a little more a la carte, and their offerings. We haven't made a final decision, but it's down. I mean, basically, these are the two players. So, one of the things I'll say, they both kind of have their own, small advantages. The fact that we're already on Google right now would probably make the transition to Google would probably happen a lot easier. Would be a lot less onerous than completely moving to a whole new platform. So that could be a consideration. I know the city has picked Google recently for their email services. So, but both of them are. I mean, as far as what we have to have, as far as increased storage and better tools for open records requests. I mean, they both. They're competitors, and they know what each one's offers. So they're very, they have similar offerings.
Andrew, let me ask you this: in the I can't tell you how many meetings we've had with Google, with McAllen, with the city, and talking about which platforms. It all seems to me to come back to a hybrid system. One piece of one and another piece of another, which is the best system that fits Franklin County government and our employees. Do you not agree with that statement?
Yes, we want to find the best system that works for us. I'll say that. You know, we may not use. You know, we need to find what works for us. I'll agree with that. You know, we might. You know, we need to use it the way that's best for the county. So, yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. Are there any other questions on IT? Okay, let's go to wellness. Is Betty Jo on the line?
Mm-hmm.
Betty Jo? Betty Jo Rittenauer?
She's here.
Betty Jo, we can't hear her.
Just give her a minute.
Susan, can you update us on wellness until Betty Jo can get in? I don't know where she is.
We had discussion that we could lower that by $5,000. I think we have $20,000 in the budget right now, but we had discussion, she made reference that most likely we could drop that to 15. I haven't reflected it in the document yet, but that was the program, the way it's constructed, I guess has room for savings there. If you want to.
Hello?
There she is.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Betty, we're asking you about the $5,000 reduction in the wellness program.
Yes, we could drop that by $5,000. Last year, we bought some new equipment and we do not need, of course, we're not buying any new equipment. So I recommended dropping that by $5,000.
Well, dropping it by $5,000, we'll still have the same offerings that we've had in the past still?
There would be, correct. We're just not gonna buy any new equipment. It's not needed at this time.
Okay.
And there will be enough money, there will be enough money in there to currently, provide, services on the wellness by dropping it $5,000.
Okay. All right. Questions on wellness? If you'd raise your hand, if you have a question on wellness. Okay. Squire Sebastian?
Yes, but Joe, can you tell us a little bit about how much use that equipment? I think we've had a pretty vigorous discussion about this last year. I just want to see if it is continuing to be used. I'm saying the sheriff's office, is that wrong? I mean, it's there, so I don't know, or maybe I could be wrong. But can you tell us a little bit about the use of the equipment right now?
Yes, ma'am. The wellness center is located, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you, Betty.
Okay. I'm having some internet connections here October, so, that equipment is being used, by any county employee, that wants to use it, and we've had a sign-up sheet in there, and it's being used. Currently now it's not being used, of course, but, it is being used. I'm gonna say anywhere from 30 to 50 employees been using that
Yeah.
wellness center.
I went up there and used it before it was totally shut down, and there was a lot of employees. I was very impressed with firemen and sheriff's employees up there working it. So yes, they are using it, Sherry. You would be proud being a trainer. Squire Tracy?
Good. I still had another.
Okay, sorry.
But if you can come back, that's okay. Come back to me. That's fine.
Squire Tracy.
Yes, sir, thank you. Do county employees need to go to Betty Jo and get a key for the wellness?
Betty? Betty Jo, can you answer that?
Give her a minute, she's having some.
I'm here, can you hear me?
Did you hear the question?
No, I did not.
The question is, how does an employee go about getting access to that facility?
They can contact me or the deputy judge. We have the key to that facility, and they have to sign acknowledgments, 2 forms to get the key, and then we keep those in file in the office. So if any county employee is interested in using that facility, they can contact myself or the deputy judge, and we can give them access to this facility.
Okay, so currently you would say we have about a little over 50 people that have signed out keys, Betty Jo?
Yes, that's correct.
Squire Sebastian?
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the access question, so I appreciate Squire Tracy asking that. Is there a sign-in sheet, every gym that they work at, log in so that they know how they're there, what day, sign in? When you signed out, some of them are electronic, some of them are not that way. When I trained at the country club, it's not that way, you sign a paper sheet. So tell me how that works there at this facility.
Betty?
Betty's having problems. There is a sign-in sheet. You may answer it for me.
Yes, there's a sign-in sheet, Squire Sebastian. I'll answer for it. Betty, if you could get your, somehow, you're not coming through, and I'll answer, Squire, yours. Yes, there is a sign-in sheet, and that sign-in sheet is time in, time out, and it was on the wall. Of course, it's now closed right now. Sometime before all of the gyms were shut down, we limited. I went in and put a sign in limiting only 2 people in there. You must clean the machine, all equipment, and you had to wear gloves if you used it. And then when the governor said all gyms would be closed, we closed it down. So it is not open at this time. So, Betty, are you back on yet? All right, we're gonna, are there any, okay, Squire Sebastian?
One other question.
Okay.
I just wanted to see what the percentage is of utilizing this service that is county owned as opposed to utilizing other gyms where the county subsidizes. So I just wanted to kind of see what the percentages are, because I know the county has an opportunity, gives employees an opportunity to belong to other gyms within the community, and they pay like a monthly stipend, a portion of this monthly membership for that individual membership, not a family membership. So, Betty Jo, can you give us sort of an idea about how many are utilizing the facility that the county owns as opposed to other gyms, so we can see what is the most cost-effective route for the county to participate in health and wellness and have the available? Thank you.
Betty, are you online?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Betty.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having terrible internet connection here. At the wellness facility at the sheriff's office, it's only county employees. They cannot bring anyone in with them, okay? So it's only county employees there. At the other 3 facilities that we have probably about 60 employees that is utilizing those facilities. That's the gyms here in Franklin County. And there's probably, I'm going to say about 25 employees that's using the family membership. And we pay up to $25 per month for the family membership. The single membership for the other facilities, we pay up to $20 a month. Did I answer your question, Sherry?
You did in a way. I was just trying to figure out if you said 30 use the facility that's county owned. I'm just trying to get a count of how many are used the facilities. What is the most beneficial for us, because we're going to keep buying new equipment all the time, and we're going to have a smaller usage at the county than we do at these other gyms. You know, we need to figure out what is in the best interest of the expenditure of tax dollars, one way or the other. So I was looking for kind of a head count.
Okay, we have over half employees using the other gyms here in Franklin County. I do know that. So it's about, I'm gonna say less than at the wellness center at the sheriff's office. Like I said, about 30 to 40 employees there.
Okay, all right. Now, Susan, if you would, let's go back and let's go start and review the whole budget. And what I'm going to do is ask you to review the budget. I think unless you want to talk any more about the revenues and the budget to get to the end of the year, the new budget compared to this year's budget. And then what we'll do is we'll go back through the line, starting with Squire Moore, with questions every few minutes as you're starting to review the budget. Is that okay with you, Susan?
Yes, sir. Well, we can approach it however court wants in detail. I'll make one comment. The 430 documents that were distributed, we had a budgetary increase represented of around $139,000. As revised so far, we have that's down to about $7,000. So this is really a very stripped down budget, and it is intended to be more or less a continuation budget with some, the exception of the borrowed money and that one capital expenditure there. But most of the other capital expenditures it's been attempted, and the intent has been to remove them. So I can take it by line item or at the direction of the court. I could skip directly to on the emergency services. If you want, Judge, we did overnight get in the final quarter for our payment for ambulance service and 911, and the ambulance service will be about $1,000 over budget based on that one. But on the 911, we'll have a budgetary savings that is around $54,000 based on those billings that I just saw in an email that I was looking at. So other than that, we can look at that line item when we get to it. But Judge, you want to speak to any of these? I know the judge directed a savings on the furniture and fixtures line item. You can see the $4,000 decrease there. We've already discussed the county attorney's budget. I can't see anybody's hands raising, or Judge, if you want to.
I'm crazy. Hello.
Okay, let's do this. I've got 4 hands up, so I would rather, let's just start with Squire Moore. Squire Moore, you have a question? Can you hear me, Squire Moore? Unmute.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, Squire Booth, you have a question? And if so, unmute.
I have no questions.
Okay, Squire Tracy.
No, it's not.
Squire Muller.
Thank you, Judge. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Susan, thank you for everything you do again. I mean, I think it's pretty common that, looking at national news, local news, everything, that we're gonna take a hit this year. You know, I keep saying 25%, just because that's what private industry is looking at. What is your solution? I mean, other than borrowing money, I mean, do you have a thought overall? You know this budget probably better than anybody. Have you thought about how we can make that happen?
You're asking for my recommendation has always been revenue. We have activities that have zero amount of fee offset. We've been talking about charges for services for planning and zoning. There you have a structure there that's over 20 years old that has a mechanism to increase fees so that the people that use that service will pay more, closer to their fair share for that utilization. And folks, we've got the biggest elephant in the room that we have every single year, and it's shaped like a big red garbage can. Okay? Let's get real here. Once we get to that line item, you see $1.5 million with zero revenue attached to it. And it's not revenue, how about it's a fee for a service that is not really a governmental service obligation. So, you know, the jail is a mandated service. We have a lot of mandated services and a lot of mandated appropriations. And we do have some mandated revenue sources that we have, but when we have areas of service activity that squeeze out so much of the money that we're taking in tax-wise, it puts an undue burden on our tax obligation, and it skews our tax rate, making it look higher than when we compare to other counties because of the services that we're absorbing in our general fund. So, Squire Muller, my answer is revenue. We've heard the chief say that his budget is people. We have people that provide the primary services. The sheriff's office doing law enforcement. That's people on in those patrol cars. Most of our services we do, it's about the people and the benefits associated with them. So there's my 2 cents, or there's my $1.5 million for you.
Squire Muller, you have anything else? Okay, Squire Blackburn?
I don't have anything at this time, but I would like to echo Squire Muller's comments. I know it's hard to generate revenue if we don't update our fee schedule with the planning and zoning. And I, for one, don't want to raise taxes on anybody. So it's a matter of spending. I don't have any other things at this time.
Squire Sebastian?
Thank you. So, Madam Treasurer, I'm hearing you say, we talked about this multiple times, updated planning and zoning fee schedule. That's going to get us a portion of this. And I'll just submit to the court that there's no way that's going to raise $7 million. I've heard that we're going to need that. And so, we've talked about this multiple times. I've talked about it, Squire Muller's talked about it. I'm not sure as we know that our revenues are going to be let off, so I'm not sure our proposed continuation budget, why we haven't asked our department heads to all come back with 15% cut in their current budget, and then lo and behold, if the sky's open and the heavens open and money rains down on Franklin County and we get more revenue, it is much easier to amend the budget to add revenue than be with our backs against the wall in a crisis situation where we're having to tell everyone to take it out later when we're in an emergency. So I just, again, kind of stand on that point. So I will be participating in the budget discussions with the
Susan, do you want to say anything about cutting the budget 15%? Do you have a thought on that? More?
I'll say this, the road department budget that we have configured right now has a $600,000 appropriation estimate for road projects with a decrease in the corresponding revenues. But I think John is here, he'll say that the county road aid and the municipal road aid, to the extent that he budgets for that, it's really covering, again, it's covering his personnel. Those $600,000 in road projects, most of the time that we put them in there are interlocal agreements that we have, or memorandum of agreements that we're anticipating a reimbursement for. And we don't have that reimbursement scheduled this year. And we have not made a corresponding decrease because we are presenting a continuation budget. We've not made a corresponding decrease in the road project appropriation. So in order to fund that consistent appropriation, or that level appropriation for road projects, we're showing a bigger budgetary deficit for the road department this year than we have in prior years. And that's a budgetary representation of a deficit, okay? So that's a big example. There's a really big chunk right there that budgetarily we could represent in a different way by changing that $600,000 road project appropriation.
So I'm waving at the camera, Susan, you probably can't see me. I do have one question, and I don't recall this, so you can help me with that. When I worked in state government, there were a number of programs that we were responsible for that when we drew down federal dollars, we had a required state match. Are there any state programs where we're drawing down state dollars outside of a grant that is a recurring source of revenue for the county where there is a required match? Discounting grants.
I'm not familiar with that kind of structure. If you're talking about restricted spending, the county road aid and the municipal road aid are restricted to construction and servicing, the roads, but that can also cover repairs and maintenance. It doesn't have to be a pass-through for an asphalt contractor. It can be regular repairs and maintenance to existing roads. So,
I understand what you're saying there. I'm just trying to find out if there is, in order to receive some state dollars, if there is a requirement to match that with specific county dollars, not to a specific purpose, not for restricted, these aren't, $13 restricted monies I'm thinking about. I'm just trying to come up with, is there some amount of our overall budget that we have to set aside for matching requirements that state out of a grant? Grants, not sure what's going to be available to given grants. So I always count those. I'm looking at recurring revenue sources from the state, and are there any matching requirements that we have with county dollars for that? I'm hearing you say no, but I just want to be sure I'm intuiting you saying no. I want to make sure I hear you say no.
No.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Susan, can you put up, and let's start we can start with the judge's office and then go through all departments. We've got another hour to go, and let's, in this new proposed budget, and let's go through and let everybody look at it, what we're proposing, what we had last year and what we're proposing for this year. And if you will raise your hand on any questions you have, and we'll go by departments, by everybody's budget, go through it, and we'll answer any questions and work through it how we need to do it. So let's start with the county judge, and if you would, Susan, explain what was last year and what was last year's budget, what is this year, and maybe something that was different, and then we'll do that by departments.
Okay, Judge, I'll count on you to speak up to interrupt me because I won't be able to manage answering questions without you moderating that way. So
You got
in the spreadsheet.
You got it. You got it.
The gray lines, again, format here, we follow a state format. The account, this is fund accounting, so we're in the general fund, have departments, and then we have minor codes. The intent has been the 700 extensions are capital outlays, and it has been that those would go to zero or nothing major in those capital outlays, or goods that last more than a year, durables, whatever you want to use. It's not, in furniture and fixtures, not big necessarily capital, but it's something with an extended life. Judge has reduced that by $4,000. We've already discussed the county attorney's budget, but here are a couple of the changes that were made since 4/30, reflecting the change in the codification services grant. We will have an annual fee after that performance is completed on that grant, and we will have a charge for adding pages. We've estimated that for the grant balance and the pages at $4,500 for next year. Contracted services is for the legal consultant for the finance district, tax increment finance district. We've already discussed the coroner. The magistrate's totals are a reflection of the salaries and the committee stipends for the same number. The registration, conference, and training has been decreased by $4,000 based on projections or utilization per the judge.
So let me say that. Let me just tell the magistrates the reason I did that was that a year ago, year and a half ago, we had 12,000 in there. You increased it to 16. We've only spent half of that, and most of the conferences now, from what I understand, at least next year, are going to be in Lexington, and they will not be only a small portion of them are going to be in Louisville, so you won't be spending the night. So I reduced it $4,000 back to $12,000, which it originally was 2 years ago. So
yes, thank you, Judge. That's correct. And now I recall also because we had a large new court for some additional training there. The PVA contribution is statutory, and that's dictated based on the size of our assessment, which has not changed, and it's still, that's not been approached yet, still do not have any numbers, and we've been instructed as of now to keep that flat, which the revenues are still showing a continuation budget on the revenues for that projection as well. The county treasurer line item includes a section for payroll software services. It may be labeled in your expense sheet as data processing or something like that, but primarily that's software services and license fees that we have associated with that service, and office supplies for check stock and basically a departmental line item to cover that's intended to cover expenditures from the finance office, and again also training for the continued training for the treasurer, which based on from what I'm hearing, a lot of this is going to be virtual, so in fact we probably could address that for a change. And the software license fee is for our existing software. There's been no request, well, there was a request, but there's no money in here for additional software in this budget year.
Okay, Squire Sebastian, I'll call on you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Susan, I just wanted to see our payroll software services, is that only internal, or is that a public facing? So if you can receive the funds from, transfer any funds to a financial institution or anything else, we've got a couple of lines here for those softwares. We've got the payroll services software and the other software support. So I wasn't sure if either of those had a public facing component where we could do kind of fund transit, like a transactional type with external business that would eliminate the need for a lot of, handwriting and personal attention to certain things. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Squire, you were a little bit choppy, so I'm not exactly sure what you were asking, but let me say what it is. The software support license fee is specifically for the finance software package that we have now, which is all internal, on an internal server. Now, we do have, because of the way it's set up, when I am outside of the building, I can remote access into the server here and access that software. The software that we use for processing our payroll is a web-based software that can be accessed anywhere that you have an internet browser. And it has a portal that's available to all employees for their access to receive all of their information if they choose to exercise it, and receive all of their payments, direct deposit, and have access to all of their withholding information and W-2 information historically, if they choose to access it. This is not a public service software for outside the taxpayer use. This is all internal to the administration of fiscal court offices.
Okay, so that gets to my question. I didn't know if any of this was transactional related, so that if we had to make a deposit, say at the financial institution where we do, that holds county funds, or, we cut checks through, if it was transactional related where we could utilize that, where everything doesn't have to be touched.
Well, as far as transactional related services for county government, we have to do paper checks for our vendors. The ACH payments for vendors that directly from, that is like your bill pay service that you might use, if that's what you're referring to, through your bank, has not been permitted by the interpretation of the auditor's office by statute. So we can't, we're not supposed to do those. We have a wire transfer for a very few state agencies that we're able to pay that way, but otherwise we're supposed to have live payments signed by the treasurer and one other individual to make vendor payments. We have others. This does not cover the accounting software for the occupational tax office, which the occupational tax office actually needs new software and has needed it for some time, but that's not been budgeted either. We need additional software for our finance department. We made an investment in a durable product, software. That's an investment, because of the way it ages. But there are multiple softwares out there, and you've probably seen them exploding, or at least my emails explode with them, because I've shown interest in a software that would provide more maybe citizen-friendly information about the activities that we're involved in, and also some more graphic representation of all of these numbers that we deal with every day about what it means, where you have an activity center that demands resources, but you don't have resources to cover it. So what that looks like you know, in a real life picture for the citizen information, and provides ready analytics with live data instead of me having to populate a spreadsheet or, you know, factor in, you know, all of the changes that are being made in the tax office at this time of the year. It provides a hands-on platform for all of the fiscal court members, and provides hands-on for all of the department head users. You know, you have access by the public to see what's going on the fly, and it's a very strong budgeting tool. But I did not have the leeway in a budget when we bought our software 2 years ago, 3 years ago, to get that feature in our product. The city did get that feature, and it's very robust, and it's a nice thing to have, but we didn't extend ourselves that way. It's $20,000. There are services out there about $5,000 a year or something like that, you know, that we could have, and we could, in these times when you have less access in person, it might facilitate some of these meetings better, but we're not reflecting any of those kinds of changes. That we're just showing status quo software services in these budget line items.
Okay. Susan, continue on, and we'll answer questions.
The Human Resources Office has 2 full-time staff members. The Occupational Tax has 1 full-time staff member. Again, they have no provision for new software that's been planned for this budget, but it's all of that office continuation budget. The elections, I might say, I don't know where we stand on that at this point with Jeff. I know the clerk has made some comments about how the elections are going to be conducted, but our responsibility is at fiscal court level for providing the elections. So again, the best plan that I can make right now is, or what we can show, is this continuation budget, and which is what many of the counties are doing, is showing that, and then as the changes occur, because we have such a line item controlled activities budget, and the spending is controlled by fiscal court on a regular basis. It's not like we can just take this line item and spend it for something else. It is still restricted for elections. Now, budgetarily, if there's going to be some savings there because of the way the election is going to be configured, I don't even have a good guess. So it would be my recommendation, again, to continue to show this flat level continuation budget, as opposed to making some wild ballpark guess that, oh, well, we're going to do everything by mail, or we're going to have, 10 election centers, or instead of 44 precincts or whatever, and so we're going to save money, but it would be too much of a stretch to guess. So again, that's why we see these zeros in this increase or decrease line item. I think we had an in-depth discussion about planning and zoning. There's no change in services listed here, or the structure or the organization. As a matter of fact, overall for this budget, I've not been instructed to represent any organizational structure changes to the budget for the activities that are being performed or will continue to be performed. The community development, that's our grants area. The community infrastructure has been, you can see it's a 700 line item again, that is listed for streetlights. And we're showing a continuation of that. The utility line item is for the monthly utilities on the streetlights, as well as the sirens that are already in place. But again, that line item has not been changed. We did remove we talked about the maintenance budget already. We did remove that vehicle, And the 5081 is the Judicial Center, which, as we discussed, has a revenue offset for operations of the Judicial Center, with the exception of the Commonwealth Attorney's rent, which is a new item, but does have an offset with some PAC money. The talked about information technology. This is a statutory appropriation that we make we have not used any of it, but juvenile detention is a statutory appropriation. That's based on housing one juvenile is really what that is based on. And that's a placeholder for that mandatory appropriation. You know, again, conceivably, we could probably, for budgetary savings purposes, take it down, but if we have a bill, we're obligated to pay it whether or not you have a budgeted line item or not. If you don't have a budgeted line item, then basically it gets flagged by DLG and your budget won't pass. And the minimum placeholder typically on any line item is $5,000 to $1,000. So we use the 5. The disaster emergency contributions, this is for our services, joint services with the city, and that is, we make these payments on a quarterly basis, so we will be making that final quarter payment. And the COVID-19 disaster supplies, this is the new line item that we've set up. Again, these numbers have a meaning they are categories and activity levels and descriptive meanings that are summarized, and you see in the budgetary process they get summarized for protections to persons and property and various ideas. This particular one, we're using this based on the Department of Justice grant amount that may be carried over as an expenditure line for the 2021 budget. We don't know, that $58,000 we'll probably receive in 2020, but most of it probably won't be spent in 2021. That's probably the biggest placeholder we can do is just establish this line item. We were instructed by AOC to create this same line item for the Administrative Office of the Courts. So at their direction, you know, we may have ongoing expenses that the counties have to foot the bill for and get reimbursed for by the state. I would say overall, and you know, will be directing us over some time about how some of this FEMA and whatever other agencies are involved with the COVID disaster will impact our spending side as well as our revenue side. But in the meantime, this is really the only line item that we have related to the disaster. Show a continuation of the ambulance service budget. I'll comment that the $630,000 budget for this year will, based on the bill that I just saw, we will slightly exceed that budget amount, again, based on the billing that I just saw. We have made a provision for an increase based on a new ambulance that was purchased, and our share based on our interlocal agreement for ambulance services, that we will share in that capital expenditure and that we can budget for it in 2021. So we've made an increase to cover that. The 911 service, this is a good example, Squire Muller, of a service that we should be revisiting for modernization of the fee associated with that. Years ago when it was established and we got into this, we had a landline that we were attached to in most households that we no longer have. So there's no revenue. There has been activity in other counties and communities to restructure that fee, and we had the opportunity to do the same. And we've had some discussion about it, but we need to do it. Woodford County I believe just did it. And it would be a much more, we could drop any 911 landline fees that we have and restructure it where everybody is paying a fair share towards emergency access services in the community. But the increase is intended to reflect the modernization of the equipment that's required in order to deliver the service in the community. And based on the estimates that I was given, I plugged in $35,000. Because we're going to we're not going to spend $300,000 this year. Again, budgetarily, we could conceivably lower the amount that we want to pay there or that we want to obligate there. But, Judge, you want to talk for a minute?
Okay, let's go to questions. We'll stop right there and they'll start down. Squire Moore, do you have a question about where we are about halfway through the budget? Squire Moore.
No, I don't at this time.
Squire Booth.
She needs to unmute.
Squire Booth, do you have a question? Unmute. Squire Booth. Andrew, can you unmute Squire Booth? Can he do that?
She's gonna have to do it herself, Judge. She's locked me out, so.
Okay. Squire Booth, you'll need to unmute. All right, we'll have to come back to Squire Booth. Squire Tracy.
Couple things. Susan, can you tell us in the office supply lines for general, under notes it says covers multiple departments. I noticed that a lot of the departments have the same line item. Who all would that? Do you know off the top of your head who that all includes in that line item?
Can you talk, Susan?
I can answer that.
Okay. Tamara will answer that.
That covers solid waste, any supplies that the solid waste office would need. It covers human resources and occupational tax, supply items needed for the front receptionist area. So, and that's mainly copy paper, pens, folders, binders. It covers our grant writer's office supplies. It covers a lot of the little smaller departments that only have maybe just a payroll line. Covers IT office supplies.
Okay, and then to touch on the training, the conference. Who is the mandate? I guess who's statutorily required to have per department?
We can't hear you, Squire.
I said in regards to training, who's statutorily required? Like you, Judge, like the treasurer. Who else is mandated to have that training as far as departments?
Well, mandated, I'm not sure about mandated, but it has been part of the process that somebody like Ann, our grants writer, gets training for FEMA. Betty Jo gets training for human resources. Susan gets training for treasurer update, and so that money has been in there for. They've just gotten paid for doing that, just like you get paid, like magistrates get paid for extra training. They get extra training as well. So it's been in there for as long as I know. But anyway, that's what that is. I don't know what if you're asking if there a state law for them to do that. No, but I think it's good practice for them to be trained and updated every year.
Sure. So like the training that you have is like that we have.
It's like we have, yes. I think that's what you said. You really are cutting out, but we're trying to hear you. Okay, Squire Muller.
I guess my only thing, Susan, you had mentioned the 911 service, and at our last magistrate's training, they did say that most counties are teaming up with the water companies to collect a fee now, and they're giving them a small percentage of it. So I definitely think we need to look into that. But other than that, right now, I'm okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay. Squire Blackburn.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Squire Booth, are you ready to say something, Squire Booth? I'm sorry, we still can't hear you. You have to come off. Squire Sebastian? Squire Sebastian?
Yeah, I have no additional questions at this time.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I answered a phone call and it just killed my go-to-meeting.
Okay, all right. Do you have a question?
Tell you the truth.
What did she say?
Well, what did you want us to comment on?
I'm not, that's up to you. You have to answer. Do you have something a question or anything you want to say? I'm just giving you an opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Well, I agree with Susan that we need to stop the litter, the solid waste collection. But I know that from Mrs. Quarles that the judge before you or before Colin said that they would provide solid waste collection so that they could have a what is it? I can't think what it is now. It's a revenue item. Household, has to do with the jobs. What is that? Help me out, Susan. No, okay.
I'm here. Actually, I did not necessarily propose that the county get out of the household waste collection. I propose that if they stay in it, that they have participation at some level by the people that receive the service. And whether or not that's participate to pay half the cost or the full amount through a billing process, that would be a more suitable format possibly than just doing it under the general tax burden.
It might have been net profits.
Well, I think Squire Booth, what you're referring to is that there has been some comment historically that, that service was provided because we had a landfill or something connected there. There was revenue offset. But we had a major lawsuit associated, I think, with a host community agreement, which we no longer have a host community agreement. We have a landfill license fee that we adopted, but that could be extra revenue as opposed to being offset cost. So even with that $300,000 in revenue, that doesn't cover the full service of the household collection contract. So I think that may be what you were referring to.
But you're all, if I can maybe bring some historical perspective as I understand it, and I'll defer if I'm incorrect. If the discussion is to in some way modify, terminate, or bill out as to garbage collection, Franklin County has been very lucky to have paid by the county household waste disposal. historically, if I remember the story correctly, that was sort of a trade-off when the occupational license fee was established, and the promise was that
Okay, that's it, right.
by cleaning up the community and that extremely valuable service, the occupational tax was passed, and that was to fund the solid waste garbage pickup.
But it didn't, right?
Well, I guess I defer to Susan on it, but that was sort of, if I understand the history, that was how it was proposed, that was how it was going to pay, and Franklin County, has been very lucky to be able to provide that critical service. I think some would argue that service is probably as critical, if not more critical, than anything else Franklin County does on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so that is occupational tax that, we put upon, okay. It's not a net profits, right? Is it net profits?
My understanding was from the history, Squire, that it was, when that was passed, that was sort of the selling point of the occupational tax, et cetera, when it was passed back in the day. That was to fund that household collection.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
All right.
You good?
I have no questions.
Okay. What did she say?
I think she.
Did you say you don't have any more questions?
That's what I said.
Okay, sorry, didn't
Yeah.
understand. Okay, Susan, let's continue on.
Okay, I'm trying to push through, guys, so, and I can't see if you have a question, so interrupt me, Judge.
I'll take care of that.
The dog warden, or the animal control statutory mandate, we've got a flat amount. We took out any vehicle because that was taken care of in the prior fiscal year. This next section is a restructuring. So we have a new line item for the recycling. Well, not the recycling and compost grants and the litter grant program. These items were formerly covered under the road department budget, but it was more appropriate, we felt like, to capture those under the general fund, since our road superintendent really doesn't participate or administer those programs. We have an employee that under the general fund that does that, so we've moved those line items to the general fund, so that's why comparatively you see this increase. You would see a corresponding decrease on the road side, on the road fund side. This is this number on the household hazardous waste grant, waste grant and landfill disposal, one of the lines that has been adjusted to reflect the grant request that was in your 326 court that you I gave approval to, as well as the line item for the recycle and compost grants. That number was changed from your 430 work session because I didn't capture the grant request that has been filed for the upcoming year for recycling and compost grants and household hazardous waste grants. So I've changed those amounts to reflect the amount that's anticipated from those grants. In addition,
Susan, can you stop right?
Change to the.
Can you stop right there, because as
Sure.
There was a question last week, I think from Squire Muller to Brittany about the grant on when would we find out or know anything about the acceptance of the grant. Is that correct, Squire Muller? Do you want to ask a question again to Brittany about that grant? So, because we've got her on the line now.
I've since reached out to the state.
Okay, hold on, Brittany. Let's let Michael ask the question.
No, she can go ahead, Judge. I'm trying to get my thoughts together on what we talked about exactly. So let Brittany take.
You had asked me to find out when we might figure out when we would find out what we were awarded. for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. I did reach out to the representative at the state that I deal with for these 3 programs. He mentioned to me that the state is probably not going to have their budget figured out for another week or so, or at least that's when the grant personnel are going to learn about the budget. So the middle of May, and then they have to take the time to figure out, to process applications and go through. So we probably actually won't find out until the middle of June or so what we were awarded.
And then, so Brittany, the other grant that was on our agenda last court meeting, that had to be turned in by when?
What we talked about last court meeting was actually a program that was written into one of the grants. It was written into the recycle grant. The reporting or that grant closes on June 30th, and my closeout report is due July 15th. So, but I'm still working on that. I've got a couple calls into a couple different people to find out some more information to answer all of your questions from last week.
Okay, thank
you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, Susan. Let's continue on.
I'll make a comment here, again, because of the way we have our format. You have your revenue worksheet, you have an appropriations worksheet. They do come together on that long form summary that we started with the meeting today, and there is a grant revenue offset, or grant offset, an equal offset. So for these programs that are in the solid waste and recycling departments. So that again should be, in my understanding, the 25% match as it was approved would be in kind, and there would be no cash outlay for the match. It would be absorbed, I guess, through the solid waste administrators personnel line item. Excuse me. Bless you. The pauper burials, Rick, I'm not sure that's a statutory mandate, but we provide a budget for that each year. We have multiple requests. That's an awkward area to deal with, but nevertheless, we do have a line item for it and a policy associated with that service. Interdisciplinary services, this is a statutory requirement, and it very often gets exceeded. As you can see, we were about to hit our budget, but I don't know that we will exceed the budget, but every single year we seem to have extraordinary utilization in this line item of services. Again, the county attorney is more familiar with that than I am. This is our senior citizens program contribution that we have again, continuation budget.
Hey,
Yes.
Susan, could you and or Rick talk to us a little bit about the interdisciplinary services? I'm assuming it is for an expert in regard to court testimony, but just to clarify for everybody's edification.
I'll run with that if you want to, Susan.
Yes, thank you.
As a requirement or as part of the process on disability hearings where an individual is claimed to need a guardian or conservator because they're unable to manage their own affairs, etc., the law put in place certain due process protections that require expert testimony in the form of an interdisciplinary team, which is a medical doctor, a psychologist, and or a social worker who evaluate the respondent and report back to the court as to their ability to manage their own affairs, be personal affairs or business affairs for those hearings to come up with a determination as to whether or not they're, quote, legally disabled. It's a statutory requirement, it's a due process requirement, so people aren't, being taken advantage of or declared disabled. I don't want to use the old phrase, but the incompetency hearings, et cetera, to allow people to take over and assist them. So that's a statutory requirement for that process. The pauper burial has historically been a part of Kentucky law, and it's one of the requirements, the governmental requirements to take care of those. Final arrangements for those who cannot take care of themselves. We've got or cannot have family or otherwise to take care of those. And the county's always had a very, very tight policy as the eligibility for that. It rarely comes up, but it has come up, and it's been utilized when needed.
We just had one just a couple of weeks ago. Lambert Moore, you have, Squire Moore, you have a question?
Yeah, on those pauper burials, you're aware of the one we had a couple weeks ago. There really wasn't enough county money to do that. Mike Harrod had to chip in on that. I want to suggest that maybe the road department can dig those pauper graves, save some money that way or something. I don't know, but
I looked into that, and that's a great question, because I looked into that thinking the road department would do it, but because for some reason at the cemetery, and I'll leave out the names, I believe your company does it, Squire Moore, and you charge X amount. If the road department does it, there's got to be more money charged because they have to have, the road department will have to have, we have to pay $150 for somebody to be there the whole time while they dig it, because they're not comfortable with somebody, with the road department digging it. They're comfortable with you, but they're not comfortable with us. So, I mean, I'm not gonna get into all the particulars, but
Judge.
Pardon me?
It's just a suggestion. I wasn't aware of that. So
Yeah. I looked into it, thinking that we could save some money on it as I went through this case with the coroner, and I'm sorry, it wasn't going to be worth.
It doesn't come up very often, but
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing it up, though. Thank you, though. It was a great question. All right, Susan, if we can move on. You talked about senior citizens.
The non-public school transport, again, is another structural change. This is a service that, again, a continuation of service that's existed, no change. It's just that it's being moved from the road department to the general fund because the road department doesn't do anything associated with that. In the past, there was some arrangement where the road department gave some offset, but now it's just an administrative monies passing between agencies. There is a revenue offset for this expense. The Friend of the Court Services activity level for this department is showing with a decrease in the budget. We met with the Friend of the Court, the judge, the deputy judge, and I met with the Friend of the Court, and he offered some savings based on some negotiations he was doing for some services, and was able to get some savings there, and also based on the budget that they had for office supplies. It used to be more paper oriented, and it's more computer oriented now, so they no longer need those so many forms, paper forms, based on the change in the way they handle the program. Last meeting we discussed, the court discussed the outside agency request. It was agreed at that time that we would decrease that budget only by the amount of one particular event. So the current year's budget at 151 less that particular event leaves a budget of 131. I'm not aware of the specific distribution for that at this time, but again, monetarily, that's how much is a placeholder for those outside agency requests. The CASA program has a separate line item for their agency because it started as a grant, but no longer has grant funds associated with it. It's a strict county fund outlay for that program, and it's shown as a continuation amount. The VOCA program does have a grant offset for this program. Again, it's a continuation budget with no increases. The only change is that the rental of that space is dictated by the administrative office of the court, so we're taking their figure with the deduct there, with the savings there, which is will provide us that savings for renting that space. We've had some discussion already about the Lakeview operations. This was, I believe, Bourbon on the Banks last year. That's gone to zero. That no event is planned. No provision for any capital improvements at the park in this budget. Continuation of financial support for Economic Development Agency at the same amount as last year. And then the administrative line items, or general services line items, is listed here for, I think they're pretty I think the line items are self-explanatory. If there's questions associated with either of those, we've already talked about the wellness program, the vehicle repair, maintenance, and fuel for, I think that's mainly planning and zoning. I think, Tamara, you're more familiar with some of these than I am. Maybe if you want to speak to any of them, you can. The auditing services may have some impact because of the delay in the outgoing sheriff's office and delay in some of the billings from the state on the fee audits associated. But again, it's a mandated appropriation to have an audit, excuse me, audit. So we'll address that if needed, but I'm hoping that that there's no increase there, that we're not providing for any increase. The insurance for property liability and vehicles, this is based on, and also includes bonds. The figure I'm using is intended, it came from, we have the estimate from, or we already have our renewals from CAECO for these services, and I've plugged in those figures. And there's a distribution here, and maybe that's why there's a change here where it looks like a big decrease, is because actually we charge part of this insurance to the Judicial Center, and that is around $50,000, I think, just for the component of the Judicial Center. So that's been redistributed to the Judicial Center departmentally, and not to cover it twice is the idea. And the insurance, we do not make any kind of distribution to the jail fund or the road fund. We just absorb it all administratively within the general fund, because we just have to trade money, to offset deficits in those funds anyway. So we just absorb it within the general fund, which is true of a lot of administrative services, that we absorb the expense for within the general fund without making all of those tedious allocations to the other funds. Excuse me. Because we have intended to have a flat payroll budget, we also pretty much have a flat, and because the legislature froze the retirement rates, I'm showing a flat overhead budget for the employer overhead portions of our payroll. I've not made any change to unemployment insurance based on the guidance that we've been given so far. We should not be burdened with the expenses associated with the disaster. We'll see how that plays out. Again, transactionally, sometimes it looks like we have some expense in some areas where we get reimbursed by the state. So, in the future, if there is some sort of disaster impact, we may be representing that in a different area, but we'll be able to have a controlled look at that and be able to isolate the impact of the disaster as opposed to making arbitrary estimates on some of these line items at this point. Workers' comp, again, is intended to reflect the estimates, based our payroll estimates in the rates associated with our renewals. This other fringe benefit line item, these are waivers, and this was a budgetary issue, and the way we book the expenses. We have, I think, about 32, I'm not exact, maybe 32 people who don't take the county insurance. So we just we're going to wrap this line item into our employee health and life insurance expenditures as opposed to making some sort of distribution, because those 32 individuals may be, maybe 10 at the fire department and 10 at and the general fund and 10 at the sheriff's office or whoever, and so they could be all over the board. So again, we just wrap it into the general fund as opposed to distributing that out to multiple funds. So that's why that's going to zero within the general fund. The debt service, did we look at debts? We did look at debt service at the very beginning. So that concludes all of the general fund line items very quickly, and we did look at the debt service. The tourism fund that we just said is a complete pass-through that we discussed, so there is no budgetary impact, even with budgetary impact with the even representing the 15% decrease, because where we have a decrease in the receipts, we also have a decrease in the appropriation, because whatever money we receive in that category, we turn over to the Tourism Commission, or we turn it over to the payment of a revenue bond for the Grand Theater. And no increase for the debt service based on the estimates at some favorable interest rates and an aggressive plan, and a provision for the capital outlay for the fire truck that we've already obligated. So based on the changes as represented so far, we show a budgetary increase from 2020 of $2,158. So that's as close to a flat budget as dollar-wise as I think you can possibly get.
Have we been given any guidance from any agencies about hiring freezes or anything like that? Just a general question.
I have not received any guidance for any hiring freezes.
I'm sorry.
Or furloughs.
Are you talking about from county government or for social agencies, Squire?
County government.
No, we made it very clear that we're not hiring any new people. I think you've just gone through their budget. There was no additional increase in employees and hiring any new employees.
So I'm asking about should we have vacancies in specific areas? I'm not asking about supplementing and augmenting staff and raising staff in particular areas from 5 to 10. I'm asking about, as a vacancy occurs, are we going to hold that vacancy credit? There may be areas where we can, there may be areas where we cannot. I didn't know if guidance had come in that regard.
Well, okay, so let me ask Chief Hutcherson, are you on the line? Chief Hutcherson, are you fully staffed, or are you the last hiring that we did last time, are you fully staffed?
We are one short at this time, Judge.
Okay, so Squire Sebastian, are you asking us not to fill any, the fire department?
No, Judge, I think you've stretched that a little bit. What my question was Have we received guidance from anyone about how to handle that as vacancies come up in particular areas? And I had specifically said there may be areas where we get guidance that say that that is something we cannot do. And then there may be areas, guidance where they say to look at it. So it wasn't being specific in saying no hiring in the fire department or no hiring at the jail or no hiring at the sheriff. My question is have we gotten guidance about how to handle that as a vacancy comes up in all areas? And some we may get the guidance to hire and not to hire. So I'm asking about the guidance. I wouldn't ask
The guidance
the fire
would,
chief.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. The guidance would have to come from me. I have not given any directive to tell any employee, any department head not to hire, not to fill their positions. And I think, and I can go through, but it is my understanding that, of course, the jail is a different entity on its own because that's who they are. But I do know that the jailer has 4 positions and he is not filling them at this time. But John Mitchell, let me ask you this: do you have any openings?
No, I do not.
I didn't think you did. I know Charlie Lewis doesn't have any openings. I know Robert Hewitt doesn't have any openings. So the reason I asked the chief was because I knew that he had some changeover. So that's why I asked that question to the chief. So there are no openings in county government other than 1 fire department position to be filled.
Squire Sebastian, this is the treasurer again. I will say that based on the discussion that I heard from court and the questions they had with the jailer during the last meeting, I did have a conversation with the jailer about the staffing levels because there seemed to be some concern or interest that the staffing levels might be too high since the population had decreased, and that there should maybe be some corresponding staffing associated with the housing population at that facility. So in that conversation, the jailer did point out that they're out of the 48 staff that he has on hand right now. 3 of those individuals, I believe, are assigned for operations outside of the facility for performing supervision for community services. So those 3 individuals were they were now made available at the jail facility because the outside programs were frozen due to the disaster. But they had not been furloughed or any change made there. So just for clarification, at any point in time for the positions that you might be approving to staff at the jail, at least 3 of those will be for programs run outside of the facility that otherwise serve the community. But there was no indication that there would be any specific furloughs or layoffs or not filling any positions at the jail that I was aware of to offer any budgetary savings.
Squire Moore?
Yes, Judge, I wanted to step back to the pauper issue again real quick.
Yes, sir.
The other thing I wanted to say about that is I believe we have a event limit, and now that the state demands we use vaults, that's the big issue there. I don't think there's enough per issue money in that. I don't want to raise the amount because it doesn't happen very often, but we may need to look at raising the per event amount.
Yeah, we've had it that, I mean, some years we don't use it. Susan, you can speak to it, how it goes.
Well, let me ask a question. Unfortunately, I just went through some of this, and I was told that the cemetery dictates whether, it's not state law, the cemetery has to dictate whether there's a vault or not. I don't know all the protocols for the cemeteries here.
I agree with you. Green Hill Cemetery, where the county owns part of the property there directly for pauper burials, requires a vault. And the vault is, I think it's like $500-600, maybe more, and they require the county to do a vault. She never said that it was a state requirement. She said it's the county, it's the Green Hill Cemetery policy for the vault.
Yeah, the cemeteries dictate whether there's a vault policy or not. It's not a state requirement, it's the cemetery's policy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're at the end of the budget, and so we're going to go back around through, and we're at the end of our time too. So let's go around questioning, and then we'll follow up on next steps. Squire Moore, do you have a question?
I'm good, Judge.
Squire Booth, do you have a question? Squire Booth?
I do not have a question.
Okay. Squire Tracy?
Thanks, Judge. Thanks, Susan, for all your hard work. Obviously, numbers continue to change at a rapid pace. A great example is numbers that you went over today with us are different than what was sent out to us late yesterday afternoon. With that being said, I think it would be irresponsible to pass a continuation budget knowing that revenues are going to be significantly impacted by the pandemic. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Squire Muller?
I guess I would like to kind of echo what Squire Tracy said also. I don't understand how, when we know revenue's going to be down, how we're going to increase it $2,158. So I just have a lot of concerns, right?
Squire Blackburn?
I have a lot of concerns as well. One of them is the fact that I feel like the magistrates are put in a position where we have to try to make it work, and I would feel more comfortable if department heads took a harder look and gave us something a little closer to the reality that we're going to be dealing with than us trying to micromanage their budgets. I'd like to see some changes come from those folks as opposed to us trying to pick it apart, and that's where I'm at right now.
So, let me respond to that. And any department head that would like to respond to that question, please do. But I'll say this: we've had 3 processes with department heads, and one was a general budget way back in early March. After that, it was second time cut, third time cut. So the department heads have made their cuts. I don't think you're saying that they haven't made their cuts, but they have made their cuts. The most, and I say this publicly to everybody, and I know you all know this, Squire, so the public needs to understand because of the statements that are being made. We don't know what it's going to be like at the end of this quarter. We know that this quarter is not going to be great. We don't know how bad it is. The end of the last quarter was very good. As a matter of fact, it was better than we even anticipated. But we don't know what it's going to be like. So the reason I suggested a continuation budget was because I didn't want any more expenses. And $2,000, okay, I'm sorry that it's $2,000 more than last year, but there are a lot of expenses that come about, and so $2,000 is pretty daggone close to exactly what it was last year. And so we can adopt it, we can change, and that's fine. That's your prerogative. But we're trying to get through to the best of our ability because you can't cut when you don't know. So you can't just say, okay, let's cut $10 million out of the budget because you don't know what the quarter's gonna bring. So if you adopt a budget, you can change a budget. We can do all kinds of things in July once we better understand what's going on. So do any department heads want to say anything about the cuts that you've made in the process that you've gone through? I'll let you answer to Squire Blackburn's statement. Okay, I don't hear any, so let's go to Squire Sebastian.
So I'm just gonna echo the comment I made at the beginning of the meeting, where it is much easier to add revenue back in when we have that, rather than to be put into an emergency situation to have to reduce a budget with backs against the wall and sometimes not a lot of time to prepare for what those severe cuts could be, because they could be severe. So I don't want to speak for my fellow magistrates, but I think everyone is coming, is bringing that point forward with a different voice, saying that on the front end, it is easy to prepare for those cuts now while we're all at the table and can thoughtfully do that, rather than waiting to a situation where our back's against the wall and we're told that we haven't brought in the amount of revenue that we needed. And so then severe cuts have to happen. So I think, at least from my perspective, that's what I'm hearing my brothers and sisters around the table saying, and that's the position where I'm.
Okay, so let's make it very clear by that statement that we have made cuts, and there have been a lot of cuts. And so that's why I recommended a continuation budget this time. As a matter of fact, when I said this way back in March, you all thought that was a good idea, and that's where we are. Now, here's where we're going to move forward. Here's our next step. I'm going to assume that nobody's going to be for this budget, or very few of you, at least the majority of you, I can tell, are not for this budget. So we'll schedule a meeting. We have court next Friday, and we're going to have to start coming up and working through this process. So if we have presented, I have done my job, I have presented to you a budget. At this point in time, 4 of you are going to have to take the budget and decide what cuts how you want to cut it, and if you've got 4 votes to cut it, so be it. That's what it is. But I've done my job in presenting you with the best budget I can present to you, and you all aren't happy with it, so we're going to schedule another meeting, and that will be Wednesday, I guess, before our court, so we'll need to schedule a meeting on Wednesday. And I ask of you on that, we'll meet, I guess, Wednesday at, let's see, that will be the 13th. Wednesday at 10 o'clock again. And at that time, you have a budget, and we can go back. If I ask of you, any of you, there's 6 of you, make your list of what changes you want, what reductions you want, and please don't do, Squire Muller, no offense to your statement of cut 15%, because you can see there are 35% of the items in a budget are required, so you can't go and cut those lines. So to make just a complete overhaul of 15% is impossible in this budget. So what I ask you to do, Blackburn, Sebastian, Tracy, and Muller, and anybody, Booth and Moore, I ask you to, line by line, you go through it and you say you want this line, you want this cut, this cut, this cut, and then if there are 4 votes to do it, that's your prerogative, and that is what we need to do. The bottom line here is we can't afford not to pass a budget. If there are 4 of you that are strongly against this budget, then I leave it to you to cut it how you want, because I've done my job and presented you with as good a budget as I can under the circumstances. And remember that the circumstances are, I don't know. We don't know. We know it's not going to be as good as it was, but we don't know how bad it's gonna be. So, with that being said, we'll meet on Wednesday, what is that, the 13th? The 13th at 10 o'clock, and your task is to, line by line, figure out what you want to cut, and we'll go from there. Squire Muller.
Judge.
Squire Muller. Squire Muller. Squire Muller. Squire Muller.
Judge, would it be possible for Susan to email out her current budget that she's working off of today to the magistrates, please?
It would be. Susan will do that, yes. Good question, yes.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'll send out the document that I sent out today, or that we discussed today, and we will have another document sent out, so yes, the numbers will change again. The numbers will change again.
Okay.
Now, let me say this let me make a couple of points. Right now, the revenue estimates that are in the document that we've been showing today and discussing today with that $2,700, whatever it is, increase, has no growth, zero growth. And it shows contraction in revenues. We heard from the jailer, there was significant contractions, like I think $500,000 in contraction in revenues from the jailer. We are reflecting some of the impacts already of the disaster. We are reflecting the state payroll impact that we recognized, already saw from the numbers that were discussed. Now, I'm reporting we've got $5 million in the bank, $5 million plus in the bank from payroll taxes right now. Now, typically what we would do, we would take the way you budget, you take your historical figures, including what you received in the current year, and that's the basis of your estimate for future revenues. So 5 million versus 4.5 million is actually $500,000 shortfall or reduction in our revenue estimates. So we are making reflections on the revenue forecast side that reflect the nature of the disaster. The property tax areas usually provide us, 4% growth on a regular basis, regardless of the rate, even with the static rate. And as we discussed last year, we were anticipating significant support from the property tax assessment basis to show some impact, showing zero growth in distilled spirits. Now, I believe that's been declared an essential service, and I believe they're doing their essential services, thankfully, here with being in Buffalo Trace. Our community has some diversity with the strength of that industry, and I'm showing zero growth. That's very, 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 very conservative. Okay, so that number should really be a higher number, but I'm not showing it because I'm trying to take into account the concerns on the magistrate, from the magistrates, that we reflect some of the nature of the impact of the disaster grant. So this is all very, very conservative right now. It is reflecting some revenue impacts from the disaster. Will we have more guidance and information about that? Maybe if the federal leaders, and particularly our own state federal leader, decides to help the states and not let us all go bankrupt, maybe we'll have some sort of federal program that we'll be able to amend in at some later date to give us some offsets. But we're not going to budget for that. We can't budget for that or bank on that right now. So just and also I can't see that on the insurance premium, which we assign that revenue to the fire department. We assign it loosely, very loosely, as an offset to the fire department. We've already taken in $2.2 million there, and I'm showing zero growth there. The fire department, a countywide fire department costs, it requires a supplement with this budget presentation of almost $2.9 million in addition to the revenue that we have assigned to it and the supplement from the state. So these are significant activities that we're performing with burden on general tax revenue, and this service right here for fire protection is all about the people and their hazardous duty people. And thank goodness the state froze the retirement for this year. And I don't know what they'll do for future years. Again, some people want us to go bankrupt. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but as a arm of the state, I'd say the county has a little different picture for being preserved as long as the state's healthy.
Okay, let me make this statement and remind all of you. You cannot call each other and say, I want to cut this or you want to cut that. All these cuts and all this work, once again, I remind you, is individual. It is not, you cannot group together. Rick, I guess you can reinforce what I'm saying, that each of you has to do these cuts and these changes individually and bring it to the table as a group and not discuss these changes and work out any other types of changes or whatever until we meet again on Wednesday. Rick, would you like to reinforce that statement?
Yeah, that's frowned upon. I'd also state that there's going to be very few things that this court's going to have to do when you're talking about prioritizing services, because that's what county budget's about. It's services to the community that needs to be done in broad daylight. And if you all are, and rightfully so, being conscientious of both the revenue side and the allocations, you're going to be called upon to make some decisions and to defend those decisions as to what priorities are going to be in the future. I pointed one of them out from a historical basis that was a great priority in this community that is greatly appreciated and relied on, which is trash pickup. Another one a couple years ago, the sheriff reprioritized the sheriff's office to make it a law enforcement office. That reduced revenue in terms of their excess fees because they focused increased services, more manpower on the street, etc. All of those things are intimately related into the commonwealth of this community in terms of safety, law enforcement, environment, sanitation, etc. And those discussions, you got a hard job, y'all. Ain't no doubt there, but those are going to have to be made in meetings, in publics, not on emails, etc. Don't get yourself caught in that trap, as you all really have to do a really hard job. So, yeah, that's frowned upon. That's all I can say on that.
Okay, okay.
I have a question, Joe, about the meeting on Wednesday, the 13th. Is there another opportunity to meet on a different day? I unfortunately have something at 10 o'clock, but if Wednesday the 13th. Is that the day you mentioned getting back together?
Yes. Can you meet later on Wednesday?
Yes, sir. That should be fine.
Can you meet at 1 o'clock on Wednesday?
Yes, sir. I should be finished by 1 o'clock.
Okay. Is everybody else okay with meeting at Wednesday at 1 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock?
Yes.
I'm sorry, everyone.
All right. I see everybody's okay.
Let's make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Squire Muller. Call the roll.
Squire Sebastian,
Yes.
Squire Blackburn,
Yes.
Squire Muller,
Muller? Muller's yes.
Squire Tracy,
Yes.
Squire Booth,
Yes.
Squire Moore,
Yes.
Judge Wells.
Yes. We are adjourned Wednesday, 1 o'clock. Thank you.